Hello, my name's Amy, and I'm going to try to demonstrate how to make a Picot hem on the new LT150. I'm also going to try to emphasize the versatility of the LT150 by doing single feed and two feed on the same hem. So the machine shown here knit in with waste yarn, and now I'm going to introduce the project yarn, and I'm going to pick a needle and as the start needle, the needle that is going to knit the first row of project yarn. Now that the blue project yarn has been added, we're also going to call this the single feed yarn. The blue yarn is the single feed yarn. So now I'm going to go ahead and reset the counter to 0, and I'm going to knit 12 rows of just single feed blue yarn. Now we're ready to transfer our stitches, and you do that on the LT150 just like you would on any other unit. The only difference is the LT150's cylinder rotates, so you can easily access the needles that you're trying to transfer the stitches on very easily. This is where the procedure changes a little bit from the standard procedure for knitting a Picot hem. This first needle, this needle is the needle that knit the first row of single feed project yarn. It's also going to be the first needle to knit the first row of two feed yarn. So to engage the two feed cam section, all the needles behind that first needle have to be disengaged so that the two feed cam can be engaged. So here we're just raising the needles out of action so that we can later engage the two feed cam section. Advance the cylinder to continue transferring stitches. Now the needles are in a position where the two feed cam sections can be engaged. There are two sections to each feed. This section here is the cast off cam. These cams raise the needles to cast off position to accept the second feed of yarn. And then the second cam section that has to be engaged is the stitch cam section, which is responsible for bringing these needles below the cylinder surface so that the needle can draw a stitch. So we're keeping an eye on two things. We still have to transfer stitches up till this last needle, and we have to keep an eye on our first needle that's going to accept a second feed of yarn. So now the first needle that's going to knit the first row of two feed yarn is in a position where the second feed can be added, and that needle is the first needle, so we're going to feed the yarn into that needle and put the rest in the center of the cylinder. To ensure that the first few stitches of the two feed yarn are formed properly, manually apply tension to the two feed yarn. The needles that were raised out of action to engage the two feed cam section must still be lowered to the knit position. These needles are going to complete the last row of single feed yarn. Since these needles were raised to cast off and out of action, the loops that were on the latches need to be put back in position so that when you continue transferring stitches for the Picot hem, those stitches will be on the latch as they're supposed to be. Now that all those remaining stitches are put back on the latches, the stitches can be transferred to complete the Picot hem, the eyelets of the Picot hem. Okay. Now that we've completed transferring stitches all around the cylinder, we're going to continue knitting 2-feed. Since we knit 12 rows of single feed yarn, now we're going to knit 12 rows with the 2-feed yarn. It's important to note that when you're knitting 2-feed, that you're actually knitting 2 rows per revolution of the cylinder. So even though your counter may be reading 6, you've actually knit 12 rows of stitches. So we're going to crank until the counter reads 6. So now we are going to prepare the needles for single feed knitting, and we're also going to get ready to hang the hem. So we need to disengage the first needle and all the needles following it so that we can then disengage the 2-feed cam. That should be enough. This needle is the last needle to draw a stitch with the 2-feed yarn, so the 2-feed yarn can be cut. Disengage the 2-feed cam section. Here I'm disengaging the cast-off cams. Leave the stitch cam section of the 2-feed cam engaged until the last needle draws its last stitch, and pull the 2-feed yarn through to the center of the cylinder. Now the stitch cam section of the 2-feed cam can be disengaged because that last needle drew its last stitch with the 2-feed yarn. So this needle is the first needle that we're going to hang our hem on. And again, since we took these needles out of action, we have to bring the stitch back, put the stitch back on the latch. Once the hem is hung, now the machine can be cranked and it's back to knitting plain single feed jersey material. So here are a few examples of some things that we've made on the LT150, playing with the versatility of the single feed and the 2-feed knitting, and just seeing how these options can add a new effect and dimension to the knitted fabric. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned because as we learn how to use the machine, we will certainly keep you up to date on what we've learned. Thanks again. Take care.